Rick Cotton and Jeff Linford doing a gaggle. First reporter, Danielle from Politico.
Great. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. Thanks. I was just hoping, there wasn't any decisions made today on specific changes to the capital plan. I'm curious if federal aid doesn't come in, what's sort of the timeline for when those decisions will have to be made? And can you just, go over again which projects specifically are subject to potential cuts?
This is Rick. The framework is what we laid out in the discussion, which is we are but the reduction in revenues has forced the reduction in capital spending in 2020 of $1 billion versus what we had planned. And what we've done for 2021 is to allocate as a proposed, not a proposed, but a number in the capital budget of $2.4 billion, which is the limit of the capital capacity that is available to the agency for 2021 as a result of the revenue reduction. So that number represents an allocation. We have not yet assigned with specificity exactly how that capital allocation would be assigned to or used for particular projects. What we know is that allocation is $1.2 billion less than contemplated and provided for in the 10-year capital plan. So if that is the only thing that we have available for our capital project, we simply cannot accomplish what the capital plan had contemplated. And that will require hard choices and very, very difficult choices in terms of the capital support we can provide to individual projects. By and large, the line that we have drawn is that we are proceeding with capital projects that are under construction. The difficulty and cost of stopping capital projects from moving forward simply means that we are going to complete capital projects that are under construction. The biggest projects are the LaGuardia Airport rebuild and the Terminal 1 and associated facilities at Newark Airport. And we are proceeding with those projects. Those are very major projects. They are consuming an outsized percentage of that $2.4 billion, but we are committed to completing those projects, including their associated air train. Any other projects are simply, which are by and large in either the environmental review process or the planning process, we're going to have to make difficult choices if we don't receive the federal funding that we have sought.
Thank you, Danielle. Pat McGeehan from New York Times. Pat, you there?
Hi, if you can hear me all right. I want to ask about airports. It's kind of a two-parter because I just heard Rick say air train, so I want to make sure I understand. You are including the LaGuardia air train as part of the LaGuardia rebuild that you consider to be ongoing? Is that right?
That's right. We have looked very hard at what represents a 21st century global standard airport. And there's no customer survey you can find with respect to what constitutes a 21st century high quality airport that does not reference access to the airport. And with respect to access to the airport, we are profound believers in the value of rail mass transit links to the airport. So we regard the improvement, the complete replacement of the air train at Newark and the building of a new air train at LaGuardia. It's the only major East Coast airport that does not have a rail mass transit link as integral parts of the redevelopment of the two airports.
Pat, the second part of your question?
The second part is, I saw the reference to the reduction in passenger facility charges because of the lower passenger volumes, and I know that these airport improvements were going to be paid for in part by passenger facility charges. So how does that affect your ability to pay for your part of the airport projects?
Well, I guess it depends. It depends on what stage the projects are at. To the extent that there are signed contracts which commit the passenger facility charges to support construction financing that is advanced by private sources, that represents the risk that the private consortium undertook. But the answer is that to the extent that we are looking at moving forward, it's part of the challenge. It's why we cite that as revenue loss, because our capital financing capability depends on the revenue lines. And one of the revenue lines is passenger facility charges. So what we're reporting is that revenue line remains highly compromised. Same way that the revenue lines that are all other revenue lines that are dependent on activity levels are compromised. So that is at the core of the problem in terms of the reduced capital capacity. It is one of the compromised revenue lines.
Thank you, Pat. Larry Higgs from the Star Ledger.
How you doing? I have two questions for you. First of all, were an increase in tolls, fares, or fees considered, or service cutbacks similar to what the MTA is doing? And if not, how were you able to avoid those?
Yeah, there has been no consideration of fee increases, toll increases, Larry. That's not been contemplated. How we've done it or planned to do it, you've heard of it. There's been efficiencies. There's been a reduction of, over 600 jobs. There's been a reduction in spending, both in capital and in operating, and we're pulling it together. And in terms of reduction in services, there's not a contemplation for us to have a reduction. We're just going leaner and more efficient. Second part, Larry.
Well, that was the second part. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Larry. Chloe Callahan, Hudson Times.
Hi, yes. So I have two parts here as well. First, I understand that the Port Authority has seen an overall overwhelming increase in revenue that was just described in the board meeting. But what is expected for the holiday season that's usually busy with travel?
I think there's an expectation that, Rick, if I'm mistaken, to be a slight bump in travel in terms of the airports, but air travel, it doesn't seem to be significant. It seems like there's been a downward, trace of passengers after this second wave has come upon us. So we've seen a steady climb to some extent, both in passenger and path, but now over the last, few weeks, you've seen it turn down just a bit. So there might be a bump over the next week or two, but beyond that, it's still precipitously low.
Yeah, I would say that there are two trends that may be about to cancel themselves out. The first trend is that there have been an increasing number of public health studies of the safety of air travel, given the measures that airports have taken in terms of safety protocols, and given increasing research with respect to the air quality on airplanes. I think part of the impact of those studies, which are very important as a development, have been to see air travel ticking upwards as public confidence starts to return. However, the obvious counter trend is the explosion of the virus across the country. And that has put the virus front and center. And so while predictions have been that holiday travel would trend upwards, at least to some extent, for Thanksgiving, but in particular for the period leading up to the Christmas holidays, I think the unknown is the extent to which the surge in virus cases and the accompanying publicity literally across the country tamps down what would otherwise be upticks in holiday travel.
Do you have a second part to that question?
Yeah, thank you. And so I'm calling from a local newspaper covering Stewart Airport. So I was wondering if you guys know any information about how Stewart Airport is dealing with COVID right now, or if there's a different place that I should ask that question.
Well, we can get you with the relevant folks from aviation. I think the headline is that COVID has had an extraordinarily negative impact in terms of in general travel, and Stewart is no exception to that. We're highly focused on executing on a strategy to bring travel back to Stewart as the COVID crisis recedes, and we are confident, particularly with the recent news about vaccine, that will occur. Air travel will return. Travel to Stewart and to Port Authority airports will reinvigorate. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. But at the moment, with the intensity, particularly of the resurgence, the low level of utilization is likely to continue for at least a period of time.
We'll have somebody follow up directly on that issue later today, okay?
Thank you.
Got it. Clayton from the Daily News. Clayton, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay. I have two topics I want to dig into. The first one, I want to go back to the AirTrain topic. The whole justification for saying that what capital work would be ongoing and what wouldn't was that something is under construction. The AirTrain is in construction and I just wanted you to clarify this 21st century global standard for airports that you laid out. I don't know if there's another example of an airport that requires a second fare and a rail link to get to the airport. I mean, if you look at London, Amsterdam, Paris, it's all one-seat rides. In countries, in cities across the East Coast that you reference, it's all one-seat rides. In Asia, it's all one-seat rides. So can you lay out how this is a 21st century global standard, and two, how this, can you just give me more information on how this is an exception to your capital construction rule? And then I've got a second topic I want to ask on.
Well, I've said that we regard the air trains and rail mass transit links to airports as integral parts of airport redevelopment. There was an excellent op-ed piece in a leading newspaper of the New York Daily News that I thought did an excellent job of discussing the pluses and minuses of characterizing rail links to airports as one-seat rides or not. Having ridden a lot of the rail links that you mentioned, Clayton, the fact is the rail link from the airport gets you to a destination, and then you have other transport, whether it's additional rail rides or whether it's other forms of transportation to get to your final destination. What the rail link does is to get people out of their cars, whether it's the last mile, whether it's the last 2 miles, or whether it's 10 miles. It gets them out of their cars and gives them a reliable, predictable, non-traffic congestion way to get from the airport into the mass transit system of whatever metropolitan area one is talking about. And that is precisely what the Newark AirTrain does. It's precisely what the LaGuardia AirTrain does. It's what the JFK AirTrain does. And all of these AirTrains take account of the fact that we're dealing with a built environment in terms of the New York, New Jersey metropolitan area.
What's the second topic you have, Clayton?
I wanted to ask you about the where you guys are at with the London Bridge Associates report on the existing North River tunnels. That contract began last summer. It's been coming on 18 months now. When are you guys planning on releasing that? How far along are they? When do you expect to give us something on the London Bridge Associate findings?
Well, the LBA report itself is a report to the Gateway Development Corporation. The Port Authority acted essentially as the business, the procurement agent for the contract. We have released all of the information associated with that administrative and procurement project. That was in response to inquiries from your colleague at the Daily News. But the decision in terms of the report itself rests with the Gateway Development Corporation.
All right, thank you. Dave Mayer from the New York Post.
Yeah, hey,
Meyer,
can you hear me okay?
David Meyer. Hey,
No
yeah,
problem.
David.
Can you hear me okay? Perfect.
Yes.
So following up on the question about holiday travel, I'm wondering if you all have a number for how many people you're expecting to come through your airports for the Thanksgiving holiday?
We don't have an exact number, but we'll have somebody, David, reach out to you today, maybe with a projection for you.
Got it. And you know, just in terms of protecting those travelers from coronavirus, what are you all doing? What are you taking? What extra steps are you taking, given the rise in cases?
Well, we've tried to implement every safety protocol that we can, and so that begins from the time a traveler enters the airport. We've tried to implement touchless, working with our airline partners and with our partners as terminal operators to maximize the extent to which touchless approaches can be provided to travelers, both at check-in as much as possible at security. There are plexiglass partitions that have been put up at every location where there is an agent or a customer service individual in a booth. There is hand sanitizer available at every opportunity. The security lines, in terms of social distancing, the lines have been separated if they come in proximity to each other. There are decals which mark safe social distancing. In terms of concessions, there is at every airport, there are touchless opportunities, whether that's using your cell phone, whether that's an at your gate delivery, so that concessions are available without frequently touched surfaces. We have constant cleaning, overnight deep cleaning in terms of both cleaning and disinfection. We have monitoring, high quality and high frequency monitoring of bathrooms and other cleaning of high touch points, and we are moving forward as quickly as we can. Many of them are in place, particularly in Terminal 4 at Kennedy and Terminal C at Newark, to have e-gates where the check-in process at the gate is also touchless, so that we believe we've gone the extra mile in terms of maximum safety protocols for passengers as they move through the airport.
Hey, Dave, you might want to take an opportunity, to actually take a visit through one. Extraordinary efforts, extraordinary precautions, obviously at some expense, have been taken to safeguard against the virus in all those facilities. Michael, from the Daily News. Michael, you there? All right, we'll move ahead and get back to Michael. Colleen Wilson, the Bergen Record.
Hi.
Colleen?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I had two questions. One is, why do you think vehicular traffic reductions increased slightly last month? And then the second one is separate, but Do you have any surveys that indicate when you hope to see PATH ridership begin to resume, or is the feeling that, no one's in a hurry really to return for the foreseeable future?
Well, let me take those one at a time, because we spent a good deal of time looking at both of those. The traffic figures at the crossings had been inching up, but steadily from the most intense days of the spring until 2 or 3 weeks ago, and had climbed up to where the traffic was getting back to 90% of pre-COVID levels, meaning down about 10%. Over the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's only the last 2 or 3 weeks, the traffic has declined slightly in the down to where it's at 13 to 15%, varies day by day. We also try to compare it to the relevant prior year day. So some of these, or prior week, so some of these percentages can bounce a little if last year was a particularly high volume, which by and large it was at all of our facilities, unprecedentedly high. This could amount to the fact that we're comparing it against a particularly high week in the preceding year. So we don't really feel that the last 2 or 3 weeks, one can say with any degree of confidence that this is a trend. It's just it's an issue that we're looking at, and we really can't see a reason why the traffic has declined. So we're hesitant. We're calling it to people's attention. We're calling it out to be clear and provide the data that we have. But we at this point do not have a theory or an explanation.
Second question, Colleen.
I can repeat it. What are you hearing or seeing in surveys about PATH ridership and whether or not those commuters are interested in returning? And if so, when are you anticipating to see that begin to bounce back at a more significant level?
Well, that's going to depend on commuting patterns. And what our PATH's ridership is, PATH is obviously heavily a commuter railroad going into New Jersey. If you compare the ridership levels with the MTA's two commuter railroads, our percentages are actually the PATH percentages are actually slightly ahead of those. So this is really going to depend on what the return to workplace is within New York City. The weekend ridership has actually been slightly higher in terms of percentages of people using it. But I think the short answer to your question is that I think the percentage usage at PATH will track the extent to which office workers who have been working remotely begin to return to their job sites at New York City-based offices.
Hey, Colleen, thank you very much. Thank you to the 9 reporters who were submitting questions. This concludes our gaggle. Thank you. See you next month.